The Drake Delusion. In the quiet little town of Harmony Hills, there lived a musician named Pete who was, to put it kindly, a work in progress. Pete had a passion for music, but his talent was unique. His voice had the peculiar quality of sounding like a goose with a head cold, which didn't exactly scream record deal. Still, Pete was undeterred. He had a dream, and that dream was to become the next Drake. Pete's obsession with Drake was borderline ridiculous. He knew every lyric, every ad-lib, and every awkward dance move from the Hotline Bling video. His tiny apartment was a shrine to the Canadian rapper, complete with posters, vinyl records, and even a limited edition candle shaped like Drake's face. Pete had even named his houseplant Drizzy, and talked to it for inspiration. Every morning, Pete would wake up, throw on a turtleneck sweater, even in July, and stare at himself in the mirror. He'd practice his Drake impression with a fervor that could only be described as unsettling. "You used to call me on my cell phone. Oh wait, is that a goose outside?" shouted Mrs. Whiskers, Pete's elderly neighbor, as she banged on the wall. But Pete wasn't just content to sing in his apartment. Oh no. He was convinced the world needed his Drake impression. So, he started performing at open mic nights at the Rusty String, the local dive bar. The first night was memorable. Pete started onto the stage wearing gold chains he bought from a flea market and carrying a prop phone to reenact Hotline Bling. He had even rigged up a makeshift spotlight using a desk lamp, which he demanded the bartender shine on him during the performance. "This is dedicated to my future haters," Pete announced to the crowd of 5 people and 1 dog, who immediately started howling. As Pete launched into his cover of God's Plan, his voice cracked so hard that one of the beer mugs on the bar vibrated off the edge and shattered. The crowd was stunned silent, except for the dog, who kept howling in what might have been either agony or solidarity. "That's certainly one way to interpret Drake," the bartender muttered. But Pete wasn't deterred. "They just don't get it yet," he told Drizzy the houseplant later that night. To improve his performance, Pete decided he needed some high-tech help. He bought auto-tune software online, convinced that it would make him sound exactly like Drake. The problem? Pete had no idea how to use it. Instead of smoothing out his vocals, he accidentally set it to chipmunk mode. When he tested it, his rendition of "In My Feelings" sounded like Alvin from Alvin and the Chipmunks was going through a bad breakup. Still, Pete was thrilled. "It's experimental. No one's ever heard Drake like this," he declared. Emboldened, Pete booked himself a slot at Harmony Hills' annual music fest. This was the town's biggest event, and Pete saw it as his big break. He even printed flyers that read, "Experience the goose of rap. Pete channels Drake." The day of the festival arrived, and Pete was ready. He had rented a fog machine for dramatic effect, which promptly malfunctioned and filled the stage with so much smoke that the audience couldn't see him. "Is he even there?" someone in the crowd asked. "Maybe it's a metaphor," another replied. Pete emerged coughing but undeterred. As the fog cleared, he launched into his set, complete with chipmunk auto-tune and some truly questionable dance moves. He tried to recreate Drake's signature swagger, but it mostly looked like he was dodging invisible bees. The audience was a mix of horrified and amused. A few people filmed the performance, and before Pete knew it, clips of Chipmunk Drake were all over social media. "This guy is a whole mood," one tweet read. "Is it bad?" "Yes." "Is it iconic?" "Also yes," said another. To Pete's surprise, his performance went viral. Within days, he was booked on a morning talk show as the internet's favorite terrible Drake impersonator. "Pete, what's the secret to your success?" the host asked, barely suppressing laughter. "Authenticity," Pete said earnestly. "And also, a deep respect for Canada." Pete never became a Grammy-winning artist, but he did carve out a niche as a novelty act. He released a mixtape called Drake Goose Chronicles, featuring hits like Hotline Squawk and God's Honk. He even went on tour, mostly at comedy clubs and petting zoos, but hey, a gig's a gig. And through it all, Pete remained convinced he was on the verge of greatness. Drake hasn't called me yet. He often told Drizzy the houseplant. But I'm sure he will. He just needs to hear my chipmunk mode live. As for the rest of Harmony Hills, they were just happy Pete's performances were now happening far, far away.